Hello, everyone. My name is Rupal. I'm here hosting the session with the Canadian Urban Institute with my colleague Gabriella, who you can see there, and I'm sure many of you have received many emails from her. For the past year or so, we've been working with Community Foundations of Canada, who have funded incredible projects across the country as part of the Canada Healthy Communities Initiative. And we're really excited to continue to have the opportunity to host these mob sessions, as we call them, where we can bring together community builders, leaders, urbanists, activists, and placemakers to share inspiration, share knowledge, and share stories about their work. So before we get started, a couple of friendly Zoom reminders. You can see and hear us, but we unfortunately cannot see or hear you. And this session will be presented in English with French translation. So if you'd like to access the French interpretation, please click the globe at the bottom of your screen and you'll be able to select the language you'd like to hear the session in. And when you've got a second, please share your name, your organization, and what territory you're joining us from in the chat. I'm joining today from Toronto, which is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. This territory is also home to many other diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. I also want to acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississauga and Chippewa bands. We are trying something new today with the purpose of making this session as interactive as possible. Gabriella will share with you on the chat a Google Doc. It's an open note-taking document that anybody who's interested can collaborate on. It's going to be used for note-taking during the session. I'll be in there. Whoever wants to jump in, please jump in and explore. We are a big group, so you might find yourself writing on top of each other for a few minutes until everyone finds a spot, an empty spot for themselves in the doc. Please share a bit about yourselves. Please share your reflections on the session and any other information about your projects or your organizations that you'd like to share. And you will all retain access to this doc after the session, so you can come back to it for reference. Today's session is going to be about storytelling, and we're so honored to have 4 fantastic guests and speakers from across the country who have a vast variety of experiences with storytelling. I'll first introduce you, get you acquainted with our presenter, Uytae Lee. He is a writer, a videographer, and a video columnist with CBC. He's the host of About Here, which is a YouTube channel where he shares stories about urban planning issues in Vancouver. He will start us off by sharing his approach to storytelling, how to get started with it, as well as some tips for you to communicate stories about your own work. And joining Uytae after his presentation will be leaders from 2 projects that were funded by the Healthy Communities Initiative this year. Firstly, from the Red Deer Public Library in Alberta, we have Tatiana Tilley, Program and Community Engagement Manager, and Candice Putnam, the Brand Manager. They're both going to share a bit about their transition from an in-person environment to a virtual environment, and some experiences about how they use social media to share stories of their community and engage with different types of audiences. We're also joined from Newfoundland and Labrador by Dan Rubin. Dan is a retired educator, community organizer, author, and musician. He's also the founder and the chair of Food Producers Forum, which is a provincial nonprofit society dedicated to expanding and increasing community-based food production. Dan is going to be sharing some reflections regarding how they have used storytelling there to create a shared vision to return food sovereignty to local control. Thank you for joining us today. That's all I have from my side. So over to Uytae to get us started.
Okay, thank you so much, Rupal, and hello, everybody. On this, the void that is my screen. Oh man, it's such an honor to be here and to give you my thoughts on storytelling. And I'll be fully honest with you, I'm a bit self-conscious about this because really I'm not great at giving advice, but you know what, I mean, here we go. Let's just give it a go. So as you know, today, the title of today's session is How to Unlock the Power of Storytelling. So how do you unlock it? Well, oh, here we go. You need one of these. I'm glad that I can't see people's faces because I don't know if I want to see the reactions to that lame joke. Someone did recommend to me that I should start this with a joke, and that is the best I've got for a morning presentation. But anyways, I kind of wanted to, start off by acknowledging that, I think the term storytelling, it's honestly, it can come off a bit cringy these days. It's a bit of a trendy word. You see it on literally every like marketing agency's website or every videographer's website. It's really become this term that's like synonymous with how do you get, how do you promote yourself? How do you get yourself out there? And to me, that's become a real pet peeve of mine, because I really want to argue that storytelling at its core is not marketing. It is not promoting something. And I think this confusion that we've kind of created around this term is actually leading a lot of us to tell worse stories. So today, I'm hoping to add some clarity to what storytelling means, and hopefully demystify by sharing the principles that I use to write better stories. And I hope it offers you some takeaways for how to communicate your work better. And and I hope I don't come off like your high school English teacher. So I've got a presentation that I'm going to share here, so we can not get too bored of my face. Here we go. And we'll share that. I'm going to assume, unless someone interrupts me, that it is all viewable. Okay. Fantastic. All righty. So this is a saying that a lot of comedians mention. I saw it on, if I'm honest with you, I saw it on a YouTube clip and I kind of forget exactly who said it. So I'm just going to quote it, attribute it to many comedians. But you hear this a lot. The point of comedy is first and foremost to make people laugh. It's not about how smart your points are or how politically correct or incorrect your comedy is. It's about the laughs, right? I think a very similar principle applies to telling stories. Here's my sort of appeal to you. The point of storytelling is first and foremost how, to entertain. The value of a story is really based on how entertaining it is to an audience. And I don't mean this as like, it's got to be funny or it's got to be, have sweet graphics or something like that. I really mean it in the very definition of the word. To entertain is to keep a group of people interested or enjoying themselves. How well do you captivate people? How well do you capture their attention? And there's a really great sort of result that comes out of this intention to storytelling, which is that people generally tend to enjoy storytelling. They, really get invested in a narrative, or they find value in the characters or in the ideas, and they'll often share it with others. They like it, simply put. Now, this is not to be confused with marketing. Marketing, there is some overlap, which I'll get into, but in my humble opinion, the two really share very different root goals. And of course, with marketing, the goal is not necessarily to entertain. It's first to promote a product, a service, an idea, or an organization. And I'll be honest with you, the truth of the matter is people generally don't enjoy marketing. They don't like it because they don't like being sold something. And I'm sure this is a feeling you can relate with. You get served up a YouTube ad and this is the button you're reaching for as soon as possible. So I want to make one thing clear though. Storytelling can have a point. It can have a purpose. But that's just not the main purpose of storytelling. I like to use this example, Robin Hood. People don't read Robin Hood because it has a message of wealth redistribution. They read it because it's a good story, right? Okay. Now, this is where we'll call this the opportunity slide. This is where a lot of people have seen an opportunity, right? With storytelling, people seek out your content. I'm messing up the order here. Sorry. I'll start with marketing. With marketing, traditionally you create content. You pay someone to make a video or a graphic or a radio spot, right? And then you pay someone else to amplify that message for you. You take out an ad in the newspaper. You buy advertising on your local TV network. And the reality is people generally find that annoying. And so many people, media savvy types have kind of seen the opportunity within stories where, you start off by creating the content. And, if you do it well, if you do it right, your audience, people will seek it out themselves. They'll amplify their message themselves. And they will hopefully like it. And, I'll be honest with you, this is a very kind of cold, cut and dry justification for, why we should tell stories. And it really glazes over kind of my own sort of depth of feelings about why telling stories is important. But this is the justification that no one can really argue against, right? Storytelling is a very, very effective way to spread a message, spread awareness about something. But here's the problem. The problem I see over and over again is that most organizations try to tell stories, but really they end up making marketing because, let's admit it to ourselves, most organizations interface with the public because they have something to promote, right? And listen, there is nothing wrong with that. Like I'm sure many of your organizations are trying to change the world, have a really compelling idea, are trying to fix things. That's really, fine. But if you're going to tell stories, you have to remember what stories are for. They're for entertainment. And, I work with a lot of organizations at creating videos. And from my experience, most tend to forget that very principle. They forget that people don't like being sold stuff. So they write their stories in a way that is clearly selling something, and people sniff it out immediately and they don't like it. So, a conversation that I have with myself often is really, how do you write a story that maybe has a purpose, that has a message, that promotes something, but doesn't come off as marketing? And so here are some of the things that I've learned to really pick up on. And again, I told you, I'm not great at I'm not great at like offering advice. So I'm going to start today off with here's what not to do. Okay. So I've kind of compiled it into 3 different groups, 3 storytelling crimes committed by organizations that need to promote something. And so let's get into it. The first one is what I like to call grandstanding. This is when you're trying to make your point just sound more important than it is, to the point that it becomes very obvious and a bit off-putting. And a key indicator of grandstanding is something that I like to call fluff. These are words that are used solely for the purpose of boosting your point without adding any substance. And maybe you've recognized some of these words, right? Collaborative, sustainable, inclusive, innovative, community building. These are words that are so overused, they've completely lost their meaning. And I would say it's like akin to greenwashing. People kind of just know that when they see these words, it's like, okay, I'm being sold something now. Because again, it's really, all these words convey is like, this is positive, right? Whatever I'm associating with it, think of it as a good thing. So, these words, maybe they belong in like mission statements or values. They don't belong in a good story. People would much rather you just say your point without any of the window dressing. Now, this is especially a pet peeve of mine because I cover urban planning topics, and I find urban planning is just so full of fluff. And even worse than that, it's stuff that I call fluffy jargon. These are terms that are not not just try to like boost up their point without any actual substance, but are also, confusing to the average person. The average person is not familiar with any of these these terms like, vibrant or placemaking or smart city, smart growth, shape your city. Oh man, complete community. Sorry, I'm going on full blast here. So maybe I should have warned if there are any urban planners in the chat today. I do apologize. But again, I think if we're honest with ourselves, urban planners, we probably don't even really know what is like specifically any of these terms. They are kind of abstract terms. And to your average, audience, they end up coming off as like, I can tell you're trying to sell me something, but I'm not even sure exactly what that is. So it's like a bit of a double crime here. Okay. The next crime that people tend to commit, something that I call guarding. This is when you tell a story in a way that really avoids any tension or drama. There are no bad guys, there are no problems, there are just solutions, there's hope, and a very obvious indicator of this kind of method of storytelling is when your story involves very inoffensive statements you can't argue against, right? I've added some examples here, right? We want safe streets for everyone. I mean, who wouldn't want that? Or affordable. This one is a pet peeve. Every politician is guilty of this. We want affordable housing for everyone, without actually getting into like any of the. Oh, sorry, I'm getting a phone call here. That is Rule 101 about good storytelling. Put your phone on silent. But you know what? I'll save the politicians and affordable housing rant for another time. All that to say is this is just yet another way to really clearly indicate to your audience that this isn't actually a story. This is marketing. This is something you're being sold something. So I've developed a test for this, a really helpful way to know if your statement is coming off as marketing. I call it the bovine stool test. And it works pretty well. It goes like this. Does the opposite of what you're saying sound absurd? If yes, it's probably marketing BS. All right. Moving on. Well, before I move on, a point about tension, I think. I think if we're honest with ourselves, tension and problems tend to be the critical sort of piece of a story. They play critical roles, and removing it really sucks the wind out of a story's sails. And so, I really do try to encourage people, like if there are issues that your messaging is associated with, that's probably where the story is. Don't shy away from that. And really for smarter audiences, shying away from it, not acknowledging the elephants in the room, it really also comes off as incredibly dishonest. So it might even do you even more of a disservice by sort of taking on this really guarded storytelling approach. Okay, and then the third one and final one here, I call pleading, which I'm just starting to notice the French translations too. Supplier. Okay, and this is really when a story is trying to guilt trip you into something. Care about this, care about that, care about us, and it really is identified with these over-the-top appeals to the viewer. Right? These are phrases that really are meant to instill a sense of obligation, of duty, of a pressure. And I get it. Many issues are very important for it's important that many issues do get public awareness, and I think it's rather sort of intuitive to rely on phrases like this to get people to care about something that you feel like is a really important issue. But in my personal experience, in my opinion, it really is not the way you win over an audience. Begging is not how you win over someone that isn't already invested in your idea. So like for me, like stuff like this might be effective at mobilizing, your ardent fans, your people that already support you. But for the average person who maybe doesn't know exactly what you're talking about yet, or an opponent, this sort of messaging really just comes off as desperate. Okay, so those are kind of the three things, these three crimes that for me make it very obvious that your story is selling something. Now, despite everything I just said, there is indeed an intersection between storytelling and marketing. And I call these like stories that have a purpose to them, that have a message. But doing that really involves changing your perspective from where you're writing your stories, or really remembering what stories are for at the end of the day, right? They're for entertaining. So I'm going to try to get into some of my advice now, and I will sprinkle it all with a big grain of salt because it's really just what's worked for me in the past. But I hope you find it somewhat helpful here. So the first sort of approach that I really like to, use is to find the stories within what you're promoting. And, that story, I kind of referenced it earlier, like what are the problems? What are the tension points? And to that point, I really want to remind everybody here, your organization or your point of view, whatever you're advocating for, is almost never the point of the story. And I'm going to give an example here. So this is a video I made recently called "Why Did We Make Front Yard Businesses Illegal?" I really enjoyed working on this one, and it was with a local charity called Urbanarium. This is the original brief for that video. It was really like, how can we make a video that takes a critical look at setback rules and zoning bylaws? And somehow that video became, or that sort of, brief became this video. And how is, that process was really, for me, I knew that starting a video with the zoning bylaw or setback rules was the easiest way to get people to not watch your video. So I really racked my head, like thinking like, okay, what is the story within this story? And ended up finding these interesting archival photos from the Vancouver archives on all these businesses that used to set up right in front of people's houses in the early 1900s, before Vancouver's zoning bylaws and setback rules really came into force. And from there, like, that's how I found like my entry point into talking about setback rules and zoning bylaws. The story was definitely still about those rules and bylaws, but the story entry point, I guess, or like, I don't know, like, it's like, but the real story, the reason why people watched it anyways, was this question, man: why did we make those front yard businesses illegal? And I promise you, this is the first and only time I will plug myself here. So I'll leave it at that. Okay. The other principle that I really try to work with is writing to people's curiosity. And what I mean by that is really trying to adopt the perspective, to really, put myself in the shoes of the audience. Another way I describe it, I wrote it down here. It's called putting the audience in the driver's seat. So, how do you do that? It's really, trying to think less about like, what is the message I'm trying to put out there, but more, what is the average person getting from it? What are they curious about? What are their problems and anxieties? And how does your story fit into that in some way? And I'll like be fully honest with you, a lot of this means to some extent relinquishing control of your own framing. I think a lot of times I go into a story with an idea of, this is the message I want to put out there, this is the story. But when I write it, I find that the story actually changes a lot, because I'm no longer in the driver's seat. I'm thinking, what is the thought process? What is the curiosity of the audience? Another good way to kind of think about this is, a structure that maybe many of you are familiar with, which is like, boils down to like problem solution, right? Like, you create a problem for the viewers to really latch onto, to become curious about. And your narrative really becomes about providing solutions, providing instability to stability, knowledge gaps, right? Like, here's what you don't know, here's what you should be curious about, to I'm going to show you what that is. I'm going to help you resolve that. That, in very broad strokes, is like a pretty good place to start for storytelling. And it's a lot to unpack here, and we definitely don't have enough time to go fully into it. But lucky for you guys, there is a YouTube video that I think is like a masterclass, like a really good like masterclass in how to write in this fashion. It's taught by Larry McKechnie from the University of Chicago. And yeah, like, I don't get too daunted by the 1.5 hour runtime. It flies by. The guy's a really compelling speaker. And if you're if you're a bit more interested after this lecture, this talk about, how to improve your own abilities to write stories effectively, I just send a lot of people to this very link. Okay, so the final sort of suggestion that I have is really create value. Oh, and maybe we'll get a link to the YouTube in the comments after this, Bill. Create value. At the end of the day, no amount of good writing, no amount of manipulation can make up for a story that ultimately doesn't have value to your audience, that isn't interesting at its very core. So, a really important litmus test that I always try to apply is, these three questions. Why this issue? And importantly, why this issue for your audience, not for yourself, but like, why does the average person give a damn about this? Why me? Why am I in the position to tell it? And why now? Is it the right timing? And I think these are, just by answering those things, you'll get a sense of really if your story is worth telling or not. And it takes a degree of honesty, but I think that that is my last kind of piece of advice to you here. Now, here's the hard truth. This exercise, doing this, it's not easy to do. Finding the stories that really convey a sense of purpose, that have a message to them, that don't come off like marketing. It's what I rack my head with every day, and I'm still like very self-conscious about it, and I don't know if I do it amazingly, but like this is ultimately for me, like this is what I'm trying to do kind of with my work. And yeah, it's difficult. I can go with that. And so with that, I've got some like final tips, which really boil down to ways that you can kind of foster an environment where you're thinking a bit more around how you can tell stories here. So first off, find storytellers within your organization and empower them. I think from my experience, there are people that have a more natural knack for storytelling. They tend to be, somewhat self-conscious types. And once you've identified those people, really empower them, as in, don't get in their way. Don't try to burden them with like, oh, you have to put in this messaging, or you can't talk about that because of this or this. Really give I think really giving stories the room to breathe first is important. Of course, there are going to be concerns around like, like I have these discussions all the time too, like maybe certain things I shouldn't say, or certain points that kind of, would be not in the best taste, whatever. But ultimately, I think the first draft should be like the most, like free of all rules and regulations kind of draft. The second piece of advice is really to talk to your friends and family about your work. This is a very easy way to, put the audience in the driver's seat. If you just talk about what you do at work to your, to people that you trust to give you honest feedback and counsel, I think you'll find very quickly what aspects of your work are actually really resonate with the average person. And you'll find that they actually may give you the talking points that are really compelling to your audience. And finally, being honest with yourself. I think storytelling and writing is just always an exercise of like self-consciousness and really like second guessing the way you think and whatnot. But like, I think it's an important part of the process, because you should be self-critical in telling stories. It's, there is way too much content out there. I don't think anyone is complaining that we have too few YouTube videos or blogs or Facebook posts in the universe. I would really, if anything, challenge people to tell the stories that are worth telling and really put in the care and the attention that they deserve to be told well. And that is my presentation today. I hope that went okay. At this point, I believe I'm going to introduce some guests. So with us today, and I'm really excited to talk to them, because I'm very, like, for me, this is the stuff I like to do every day. It's just like, spitball ideas and, ways to just tell better stories. We have Dan Rubin from the Food Producers Forum. And maybe as I introduce you, hey, Dan, you got it. We have Tatiana Tilley from the Red Deer Public Library. And also from Red Deer Public Library, we have Candice Putnam. Hey guys, how's it going?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you.
Doing great. Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat. Maybe, we'll start with just a with a low-key introduction, can you just tell us a little bit about what you do and how that work, came through the, Canada Healthy Communities Initiative? Maybe I'll start with Dan, if you don't mind.
I realize now that I'm in my 70s that I've been a storyteller my whole life, since I was a child. And these days, after having been a teacher for many years and a curriculum developer and a school principal, and as the author of 4 books so far, working on my 5th,
Wow.
as a professional musician, and I do not consider myself an entertainer, and as a community organizer, story is very important, very pivotal, a very important tool. And I really like what you were saying about Uytae, about all this Uytae. You and I need to have a conversation at another time about urban planning, because early in my life in Canada, I worked as an ecological advisor to regional planners, and I have the usual horrible stories to share from that experience. But for me, over the years, my life has moved both geographically from the west coast of Canada now to Newfoundland, where I've lived for almost 20 years. And I've evolved from a classroom teacher to somebody creating educational programs, mostly learner-centered, mostly focused on individuality and creativity and integration of subjects, to working with Native elders twice on programs for the retention of the traditional languages. A period where I directed a play collaboratively about the residential schools, complete with bones in the walls. And finally, nowadays, working on food security in Newfoundland, what I call it is storytelling in the service of the common good. And I like your foundation that you've provided, Uytae, for how we choose and craft our stories, because not all stories are equal. What I find these days is the best stories are the ones that are true, placed in a context geographically and humanly, and that have some fiber content in them, some resonant detail. So in my own life, I seek out those stories, and I have discovered I'm a keeper of stories, and the stories that I carry with me, even though members of my own family may roll their eyes back into their head and go, "Oh God, not that one again," are actually gifts that I carry. And I dispense them as I go where I think they are useful. I'm happy to talk more about the specifics, but that's been kind of my journey.
Wow, Dan, I didn't realize I was talking to such a veteran storyteller myself. That's why I was, just feeling so self-conscious this morning. But definitely would love to hear more about your work. But before we get into that, I'll pass it off to our friends in Red Deer about their work and what you guys are up to these days.
I would we do a lot of things, and Radio Public Library was founded in 1914, and public libraries in Canada are actually only spaces where you can come for free, and nobody is gonna sell you anything. So that's kind of our unique point in today's society. So anyway, we were very happy to learn about a possibility to apply for Healthy Community Initiative grant. And the timing was perfect for us in March 2021, because we were considering what we are going to do in the summer for our community, because we knew that we would not be able to offer indoor programming. So we applied for Books in the Park pop-up mobile library to make sure that we would have good tools to be present in the community, because throughout the whole pandemic, we have been trying to be present in the community in all possible ways, because our goal as a public library is to actually enrich lives of our community members by providing access to knowledge and culture, and promoting literacy. And these days, libraries are promoting not just ABC and numeral and other literacies, but multiple literacy like health literacy, financial literacy, and all those other things. So we used an opportunity to apply for this grant to get our libraries 2 sets of frames to do a storybook program in the community, and those are mobile frames, as well as 3 tents that were heavily branded with library images and logos, so that it would enable our library staff to be out and about in the community all summer and meet people, meet families out there, because we could not meet them inside of the library. So, and that program has been very, very successful in the community, and we were very grateful to Canada Healthy Community Initiative that enabled us to get those very important tools, and we will be using them from now on.
Yeah, I when I first heard about your initiative, I loved it. Just the idea of like walking through a park. I think reading a book as you go along, it's it just sounds like a fun time. I know we've also got Candice here, so I just want to give you the chance to fill in if you had anything to add on to what Tatiana had to say.
Sure. Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Candice Putnam. Well, I've worked at the library for about 12 years now. It's flown by. I've had a number of different roles at the library. I've done, hands-on programming with all ages. When we opened our newest branch in 2014, I was able to, I came back from mat leave actually a little bit early, and I got to manage that branch. So that was a cool experience for me. And then I became the youth services manager, doing all sorts of children's programming. And I most recently pivoted to become our brand manager. So a lot of what I do is the marketing stuff. And I have a lot to learn in terms of, making it, come across as more of a story. So I took a lot of notes in your presentation this morning. So thank you for that.
I hope you found it somewhat helpful.
I definitely did. Thank you.
Just a complete rant.
Yeah, no, you're right though. It's a constant battle, because like you want to share what you have, but you don't want to do it in like you need to come and do this kind of way. You
Right.
Do it in a storytelling sort of way. So that
you
was
have
great.
to be tactful for sure.
Yeah.
I think that kind of transitions well into the next thing I was kind of curious about. It seems like, all 3 of you guys are have some experience with this whole kind of sort of storytelling kind of idea. And I was kind of curious, what do you find are the stories or initiatives that most resonate with our audiences? How do you go about finding them? Do you what's your strategy? Is there any connective tissue you find within it? And I'm just happy to open up the floor to any of you guys if you have thoughts right off the bat.
For the work that we're doing now in food security, it's very easy, because although we've painted ourselves into a corner, we're an island and strip of mainland province of 500,000 people importing 90% of our fresh food from somewhere else. We are the least healthy and the least food secure province, even though 20 years ago, we were the most healthy and the most food secure. But there's a huge revulsion, a huge return to the land going on. And we've seen many, like hundreds of examples of this across the province, thousands of people returning to local food production. So the challenge of finding stories is easy. I sent a list to our local CBC of 40 people whom they should interview, and they've started a series called From the Ground Up, and they're traveling around the province interviewing food producers and food processors and people returning food to the community level. So for us in this particular context, that's been easy, but it isn't always easy to find the right person or the right story. particularly to avoid the pitfall of marketing. And I think it's a fine art to distinguish a story that has real resonance because it's true. And we tend to deal in generalities, and generalities have little potency and little carrying power. Now, that's the trick, I think, is to find the right person with the right story.
That's a great point. I mean, and you're totally right. Like food security on its own, it is a very compelling story, but it is also one that is quite general, right? Like another one similar. I mean, it's a very cliche example, but climate change, some of these really
exactly.
overarching, right? But I totally agree with you. I think the art is really finding the relatable examples on the ground that people can associate with, you know, either emotionally or geographically. And you know, I'm kind of curious, like, have you been able to find those stories? Like, what are some of the stories you found within that arc of food security that really resonate with people? Yeah.
I want to give others a chance to speak, but I'm happy to share one specific story that really tells it. Yeah. Okay. So the evolution of our project came out of something called the Earth Sheltered Greenhouse Project, which is a design concept for a greenhouse. This is how we say it in Newfoundland. A greenhouse with its arse in the earth. So it's a marriage between the greenhouse and the root cellar in that it uses the earth for insulation and heat. It's a very efficient structure in northern climates for growing food year round. Once we began building one as a demonstration, we were ready to reach out across the province to communities where such a structure might be useful for local food production. And we put out a call and we were amazed, we were overwhelmed. We had 26 applications from right across the island and up into Labrador. So I'm going to tell you about one such application. It was a letter that arrived from Casey Budgell in Kings Point. She signed herself, and I didn't know at the time originally whether she was male or female or other. And I did not want to know. I did not want that to be a selection factor for us. But she signed herself, Casey Budgell, 14, student. And it was a proposal to add an earth-sheltered greenhouse to an existing community garden, backed up by a letter from the town council in support. But the amazing thing was that when we arrived there, when we were standing in their community garden with a circle of 16 people that included their member of the legislature, their mayor, 3 council members, 2 local farmers, and 2 representatives of local mining companies. These are all adults. They all turned to Casey, the tall, amazing 14-year-old girl, and said, she's in charge. We're doing what she says. Mm-hmm. And they all agreed on that. And the reason was, as I learned when I talked to her originally on the phone and told her that their site had been selected, she said, well, we have the community garden, and then we need to build the greenhouse. And then after that, we're going to put up a root cellar so we can have a rebuilding of agricultural capacity in our community, which was traditionally an agricultural hub. And we'll put all our surplus in the root cellar, and anybody who needs food in our community in the winter can just go there and get it. Wow. So that story, what can you say? There's a story that is worth telling, and it is being told, and it has been told on CBC, and it's the kind of inspiration that we all need to remind ourselves of why we're here and what we're doing. That's an example of a resonant story.
Yeah, I love it, and it sounds like Casey is just like an example of
she's
a human being.
Unbelievable.
When you said 14, I gasped.
Yeah.
Wow. What an inspiration. Gosh, I mean, you know what? Red Deer Public Library. Can we follow up with follow up on that? I mean, and generally speaking, like, what has been your kind of approach? Like, what do you find really resonates well with the community you serve?
Well, the thing is, personally, I am community engagement and programming manager. So I'm not actually in charge of putting stories out there. That's what Candice is for here. Yeah. But in my position, I'm always with my ear to the ground and to the community organizations in Red Deer, kind of trying to be there for them. And we are always say yes when they approach us with something. And so I have 3 stories to tell. I'll be very short, very quick, that really stood out in last 2 years. So one of the stories was that because we our goal as a library, as I said, is to connect people to the knowledge, right? And once pandemic struck, we were really limited in different ways how we could continue to do so. And some programs we were able to transfer seamlessly into virtual format, and some we had to leave till the best days when we are back with interprogramming. And but we also were able to start some new ones. And like I mentioned before, for us, we used to have a partnership with Primary Care Network, and we used to have a health cafe in person in the library before, when we would have invited guests come and talk on different health topics. And those programs, to be completely honest, were not super well attended because for various reasons, right? Because sometimes the topic would be a little sensitive, or timing was not right? So, but still it was a matter like speakers would come, and then I would feel slightly embarrassed because there would be like 3-4 people, and it wasn't really, I think, worth the effort of creating that program. But with pandemic struck and telemedicine came in finally, I don't know why we waited so long, right? So we discussed with Primary Care Network and said, okay, why don't we do Facebook Live edition of House Cafes? And actually, on our website, we have a virtual program archive. So people are very welcome to go and see a variety of Facebook Live videos that we archived under that. And actually, this Health Cafe program became very, very popular. So we do it monthly, and topics are very interesting. Because of the virtual format, we are able to have multiple speakers from different places, and the topics, even if it's sensitive topic, right, people tune into Facebook Live and they're able to access that. And then we record it and put it on YouTube. And so the funny story was the September or October edition. It was October 1, and remember that day when Facebook was completely down. So it was down, and it was the day when we were supposed to have House Cafe online. So what we did instead, because we couldn't do Facebook Live, we just recorded the program. Candice was super quick tweeting about it and saying, sorry guys, we are not gonna have Facebook Live today, but the program has been recorded and it is available on YouTube channel. So, and once she published it on YouTube, like within a few hours, we had 40 views. And for us, it's like, I saw your count of views on your videos. So for us, 40 views, it's a large number. And to me, it was 40 people actually really waited for that program and found time to, switch to YouTube and watch it. And so that's one story. And I didn't time myself. I probably don't have time for other stories, but I tell one more very quickly, and it's actually today's story. It literally happened just today. So
hot off the press.
Out of the press. So a while ago, a community member I saw on Twitter that they are looking for, like, Unit 61 in Calgary used to have a local sewing group that would supply them with heart pillows for the patients who just underwent heart surgery. And that sewing group could not supply them with those pillows anymore. And people were looking for other groups in the community who could do that. And we have been doing sewing one-on-one Kids to Go over 2 years, last 2 years. And I just thought, well, that's a great opportunity for us. So we could supply materials and instructions and ask community members to make the pillows, bring them back to the library, and then we can deliver them to the hospital. And actually, it's been received so well that today, one of our librarians had an email from a teacher who said, I'd like to make that project with my class. Can you give us, we've supplied materials and everything, we just need instructions. So right after presentation ends, I'm gonna contact them and say, yes, those are the instructions. We'd love your class to make extra pillows, and we'll just take them to the hospital.
Oh, that's wonderful. And such a great example of how, like, you know, I don't want to call it a story that feels a bit cheap, but like when there's a real need and something that moves people's heart, it really drives a lot of empathy and action from the community. And that's really cool. Thanks so much for sharing. I know I want to be conscious about time here a little bit. And I know I promised Gabriella that we would have some time for some audience questions. So maybe I just wanted to kind of quickly ask you, Gabriella, do we have some questions from the audience? Make this a bit more interactive. Yeah. Hey.
Hello. This is such a fantastic session. I'm so excited. And thank you everyone for joining and for being so creative and bringing so much content also into the chat. We actually do have one question that popped up very early on the session, and I think it's worth sharing with you and kind of like getting the point of view of all the speakers that we have today with us. So the question is storytelling a form of data? That is the question. And I think each one of you may have very different experiences and reflections around it, and it would be great to hear your thoughts.
I'd like to take that one on and say, no, it is not. Storytelling transcends data. And the reason is that information in the form of specific data is the kind of thing that as a scientist, because I'm trained as a biologist, I look at and can analyze both numerically and qualitatively. But storytelling is something else. It is totally qualitative by nature, because very often the most important things, just like in good artwork, or good writing, lie between the lines. They are unstated. And it's one of the things that makes us human, is that when we listen to a story, we don't listen to it literally. We listen to it metaphorically. And metaphors are not data. They are beyond data.
I can rip off of that a bit, Dan. I was kind of coming up with a similar response. I mean, I think nobody here, let's be real, no, I don't think nobody would ever really be like, yeah, stories are data and that's it, you know, end of story. I mean, maybe I was thinking like maybe in some ways like you could consider stories like as data points of, you know, of a way to look at a society's values and, you know, things over time. But like really for me, storytelling, like that is an act. That is something that you do. And it's really like, right. It's the performance, it's the how you know, deliver the data, so to speak, the information, the message. That's what storytelling is. And that is not, I have never been able to put that into like a quantifiable metric or any kind of rule set or whatever. It's always been just like a very elusive thing, it seems. So there's my 2 cents about it. Very meta, very interesting question though. Thank you, whoever posed it.
Candice, Tatiana, I was wondering if you have anything to add on to this question.
Sure, I'll jump in. I think I would agree. Like at the library, we collect so many numbers, so many statistics. We're always comparing this and that and the other thing. But when it comes to the actual sharing of the stories, I think that is just something totally different. It's more of, you know, sharing an experience, a feeling, and that sort of thing. If I could just like throw out like a quick tip from like my experience on like using social media. Basically, as we all know, like there's so much information being shared all the time, like everywhere we look, whether it's factual information or not. that's its own struggle. Like we use social media all the time to promote things like upcoming programs and advertising parts of our collection and that sort of thing. And these types of posts are fine and they're definitely important, but like they're not really that engaging and they're not really that interesting, frankly. So like when we can switch it up and like share real faces of real people doing real things at the library, this is where we can really shine. And again, like it's hard for me sometimes to carve out the time in my day to like really like put in the effort to be sharing these library stories, but like that is like the best use for sure of social media. Like for example, recently, we had a Star Wars Reads Day event last month, and this is something that like we celebrate all the time. And we shared a few pictures of like staff getting ready for the program and their costumes. We shared some photos while the event was happening, and then we shared some photos after it was over. And just like being able to share these stories and like this like feel good type stuff, that in itself, the sharing of the story is really, the best kind of marketing, as we've sort of talked about. And you might say like, well, what's the point of sharing pictures of an event after it's already over, because if people are seeing them now, then they've missed the event. But realistically, they're going to look at it and say like, whoa, you can have lightsaber battles and take pictures with stormtroopers at the library. Like I thought the library was just a bunch of books. So basically like by sharing our stories and showcasing the interesting things that we do, we're then challenging the very idea of what the library is and what the library can be. And bonus points if the community members themselves are the ones taking the photos and sharing the stories for you. So yeah, I would say that's a roundabout way of saying, I wouldn't call it data. I'd call it something totally different.
For sure. I know we're almost at the end. I was going to say like, honestly, I think like a good story kind of needs to have that a little bit, right? Like that's really what I mean by like writing to people's curiosity. Nobody's interested in hearing a story about what they already know. Very few, like most often people are curious about what they don't know about. And if you're offering a set of ideas that will challenge what people already think about their world, chances are that is an opportunity for you to write a pretty good story. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much, because this, I feel a bit like the police of time. Like this is such an insightful and interesting and thought-provoking conversation. I think we could be sitting all together, having a longer coffee and following up on all these topics. Having said that, we will need to slowly start concluding the session. We just want to make sure that we are very respectful with everyone's time. And we hope that this is the start of a longer conversation, and that's very important. We want to make sure that there's an opportunity, hopefully, to follow up into smaller group discussions where we can see also the faces of the 70 people, 63 people who are with us, and also hear their stories, because we all come from a background and we all have lots to learn. So in terms of starting to conclude and close, first of all, thank you to all the speakers that are today with us. It has been an absolute pleasure, and we hope to keep you engaged with the Healthy Communities Initiative program. Also, with the purpose of continue learning and with the purpose of kind of like following up this conversation, we are now going to share on the chat a short survey. We promise that it's less than 3 minutes. We also don't like responding to surveys, so we totally understand. But hopefully you will be able to provide us brief feedback about how the session went. And then if you're interested in following up the conversation, you can also provide us your email address so we make sure that we reach out to you and we continue all together. So that's going to pop into the chat now. Anyways, we also want to let you know that the session has been recorded. So the recording and the video of the session is going to be shared with you via email on the follow-up email. And also that we are approaching the end of the year, but we are happy to say that there's still one pending mobilizer session. It's going to take place on the 7th of December, and it's going to be around winter activities and outdoor programming during the winter. So we hope that we can count with most of you then. And I think this has been so far, hopefully, a great story. So let's continue together. And I hope you all have a lovely afternoon, day, or evening, depending on where you're at. Take care.